Three, two, one. Cam Newton does wonderful and limited opportunities back with the Carolina Panthers, but are people buying in enough for it to be worth trading for him in Dynasty? That and more today on the Dynasty Newsletter. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, joined by my co host, Chris Allen. Chris, is it time to trade for Cam? I mean, his value's obviously raised, but are people buying in enough to make it too difficult or what?
I think it might be a little too early to buy into it. Now, don't get me wrong, seeing him come out of the tunnel, do the whole the airplane bit, like where he comes out and seeing him hyped, it was like a really emotional game because think about
Right.
the ties between Washington and Carolina with Ron Rivera. We
Mm-hmm.
got, Curtis Samuel over there, even though he didn't play, obviously, but just like so many ties between the two franchises and seeing Cam back on the field, seeing him productive, albeit the fact that they wound up losing that game, it came down to like pretty much the last minute. A high wire type of act as we could expect seeing Newton like back under center. It was great to see, but it's just one game. One game against a defense that had lost its star pass rusher in Chase Young,
Mm-hmm.
still has a mostly banged up secondary. So I think we kind of expected this type of performance from Cam Newton. Now, over the next few weeks, he's got Atlanta. He also has Miami, who just gave up almost 300 yards to Joe Flacco yesterday. So he's got possible matchups where we can start to build some confidence for him. But let's keep in mind, again, we're talking about dynasty. Redraft, okay, fine. I can see if you might want to still continue to use him as a spot starter / streamer over the next couple of weeks. But we, at least from a contractual standpoint, he's only supposed to be in Carolina till the end of this season.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't even heard an inkling of a discussion of them trying to work out some sort of maybe 1 year bridge type of thing while they try and sort out what they're going to do at the quarterback position. We still haven't even heard, we probably won't hear until early 2022 about what their plans are or what they're even going to posture regarding Deshaun Watson, since that's still out there in the ether somewhere. So until I really see at least more, more of a, buy-in, not just from Matt Rule, but from the front office as well, of having him back in that organization.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of thing, like a longer term commitment, it's fun to see, fun to watch. I maybe can understand if you're a contender and might want to try and capitalize on that sort of thing and maybe harness some of that production, because he still wound up being a top 12 quarterback this week.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see why from that standpoint, but until really we start to see the Panthers start to buy into him, I'm not going to.
We've talked about Cam Newton many times throughout his the turmoil over the last year with him, and the general sentiment from me has been he's 33 years old. He's been elite in the past. I remember thinking, well, if the Patriots are going to re-up on his contract, then they must believe that he's healthier than last year. And I don't know that that's necessarily false at this point because they didn't know they were going to get Mac Jones. They knew they weren't going to trade up for Mac Jones, and they didn't have to. So that's not indicative of Cam Newton. And Cam Newton doesn't hold the starting job because, well, could have been the COVID situation with the test, but it could have also been that Mac Jones just produced well enough to where it was a detriment to his career to not start him immediately. Also fine. So if you take those things into account and you look at it objectively, your answer is exactly why I think that you probably should look into trading for him right now. Because you said it might be a little bit too early. Well, the only way that you're going to trade for him for a reasonable price is going to be if you try to be a little bit too early. Because if we get one more game, two more games of top 12 performance from him, you get Cam's back, you get him back in a Carolina Panthers uniform. And I'll throw a curveball and talk about DJ Moore in just a second, but DJ Moore actually looks fine. So you thought that there was going to be a detriment to the offense there.
Robbie Anderson looked good too.
And Robbie Anderson looks fine. So it means that Cam Newton he's never going to be super Cam again. Of course, people get older. Everybody gets older.
Right.
But his first touch with the Carolina Panthers again takes it into the end zone rushing. Not just takes it into the end zone rushing, stone cold stiff arm, gets himself into the end zone, throws another touchdown pass in that game. And then now he comes in against Washington and actually looks competent, right? So you could be trading for a 33-year-old quarterback that's going into, contract year, but so is Kirk Cousins, right? So, I mean, and Kirk Cousins is infinitely more expensive than Cam Newton. So if you think about it right now, November 22nd, you say, would you rather Kirk Cousins or Cam Newton? Oh, obviously Kirk Cousins, but just look ahead a little. There are many, many routes to where that answer is flip flopped. Um,
Mhm.
Carolina retains Cam Newton. Looks like the Cam Newton of old, and gets a nice little 2-year contract with them, something like that. And then they don't have to deal with the Deshaun Watson situation because the pin hasn't even dropped with Deshaun Watson. I mean,
Mhm.
yes, we know what teams are in on Deshaun Watson, but they don't even know what they're in for, which is why he didn't get traded yet. Is how in the heck do you trade for him and you don't even know if the guy could potentially be incarcerated at some point? So shout out to Drew Davenport if you want to see the legal side of things over on the Deshaun Watson trial. Drew Davenport on staff. He is a defense attorney, I believe.
Yeah. Mhm.
Think so. I'm not sure his exact job title. Definitely in the legal field, and definitely does a great job covering legal things. And he has touched on the Deshaun Watson saga intensely, and I don't think teams are comfortable with where that's going to go, considering it's not even really been started. So, who's to say that the Panthers don't say, "Wow, we really hit a gem with Cam Newton somehow," and now we will just sign him to a 2-year. Not to mention, just was it? I think it was last year they drafted 8 players on defense with their 8 draft picks, nothing but defense, and a lot of them are hitting. So you've got Chin, back there looking like he could be a star in the making at safety. So a lot of players on that defense are looking good. They might feel like they're closer to a contender than not, which is why you get Cam when Sam Darnold's underproducing, right? I mean, Sam
Mhm.
Darnold wasn't producing well, and then he goes on IR, and it's like, look, man, we're not giving up on the season. We started this season 4-0, lost 4 straight, get it back on track, and you bring in Cam Newton. Now, of course, he doesn't get the win against Washington, so who
Yeah.
knows if that really helps. But there's avenues to where acquire Cam Newton for pennies on the dollar as opposed to trading for someone like Kirk Cousins, where it's like, what's your upside there? You could go to another team. He could end up being a backup next year. Really, who really knows? I don't think that the Vikings are going to end up re-upping him. So, but I promised we touch on DJ Moore. I mean, it was probably scary for people who rostered DJ Moore to see Cam Newton coming. I was kind of excited for PJ Walker, as crazy as that sounds. Look, man, every time PJ Walker comes in, it seems like things go well. So I don't know why. I don't know why. He only gets in for like 5 plays, right? But he comes in, he's zipping around. I mean, he looks good. Okay, he looks good in five play stints.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I thought that PJ Walker was going to be fun, but Cam Newton came in. I was like, okay, sweet. So Cam Newton gets 2 rushing touchdowns a game. Seems he gets one. And what's that leave for DJ Moore? That leaves the good old Terry McLaurin stat line, like 3 for 65, and you hope he gets a touchdown. And wasn't necessarily the case. I mean, he caught a touchdown, looked
Mhm.
pretty good. He filled up the stat sheet in his first game, full game with Cam Newton. So, what about DJ Moore's outlook going forward as he's finishing up his first contract, right?
Yeah, and I think that's you can at least spin a positive tale for more like moving forward, and I think that's kind of really what we're essentially looking for. I mean, I can see why folks that are playing in those like 2 QB super flex leagues that would want some sort of punch at their QB2 position. But really, I mean, I say that for the most part, we're looking at the assets that are tied to that passing offense, like for some sort of continuity. Folks that are still rostering Christian McCaffrey, folks that are still rostering DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson. I mean, heck, we even saw a dude win $1 million yesterday with Tommy Tremble in his
Yep.
lineup. So,
So that
I mean, there are still plenty of other like passing assets or like personnel associated with the Carolina offense that we're interested in outside of Cam, and even trying to like spin myself into like a positive narrative. I mean, think about the type of coach that Matt Rule is. I mean, he's not really a defensive type of coach like Brandon Staley or even
mhm.
Mike Zimmer or any of those those types of guys. He's not really like an offensive minded dude like Zach Taylor or any of those guys. Like he's been characterized, especially coming out of college, as like the leader of men like type of guy, like almost
Right.
like more of a motivational speaker than anything else. And look at the almost like the instantaneous reaction the team had when Cam Newton started. Like when he was there, a part of the team, you could see the team immediately respond to him being back, that sort of thing. So you can already think that A guy like him and Matt Rule probably go hand in hand. And now think about the owner, Dave Tepper, as fickle as he can be with wanting to try and fix situations by trying to just either throw money at it or bring in the proper people. Well, the proper person probably isn't the right word for it because he went ahead and traded for Sam Darnold, but he immediately wanted trying to fix situations. And now seeing that Cam Newton is back, seeing that he's productive, seeing that he's also able to light a spark under the team when they were essentially like circling the drain. And like you mentioned earlier, with their defensive players starting to hit, JC Horn coming back next season after he was starting to look well before he got injured as well. So just
Stephon
like
Gilmore, if they can re-sign him.
Exactly. So it's like I can spin myself into a narrative where they kind of talk themselves back into bringing him back. It's kind of a longer road, but at least it's not like now they're just trying to get to the end of the season with a respectable record, maybe help Matt Rule save his job, or at least save face, after a really poor decision in bringing Sam Darnold in, and they'll take it from there. I can kind of talk myself into them saying, all right, well, let's maybe we'll string this along for another season, maybe 2 years, and that's what gives us some sort of foundation or stability with DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Christian McCaffrey, Tremble, if you want to dig into that. But it's just like, but those guys kind of come along with whomever winds up being under center, because we didn't have any confidence in Moore, Anderson, any of those other guys when it was Sam Darnold. We really didn't care. Or I guess we were trying to figure out what was going to happen if PJ Walker was in. At least Cam provides that stability to some degree, almost in the same way that with Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, whomever. What would our expectations be if Kellen Mond now becomes a starter and they, jettison Kirk Cousins? It's like, all right, we're back to the bet on talent type of, adage, and hoping that Justin Jefferson still becomes okay. But still, that's kind of where I'm at with trying to value those guys moving forward. It's like, okay, great. If they wind up keeping him, okay, fine. But until the other shoe drops regarding, Cam, Deshaun, whatever the case may be, I'm just hoping that they wind up making that decision soon enough so that fantasy managers and dynasty managers also know what to do.
Yeah, have time. Yeah. Quick correction. It seems like Kirk Cousins has one more year. I thought that this was his last year, but
I figured they had an out in like after 2022, right?
Yeah. The point remains, it's just like Cam Newton is not exciting to go out and try to get. He's more seems like a responsible decision to try to see if you can just get him for super cheap and hope that he extends his career. It's not like I'm trying to propose that you should be excited and aggressively trying to acquire him. But if you think that this situation is going to go positive in any way, even in a rebuild, you go try to acquire Cam on cheaply. With everybody who's been in Superflex for multiple years knows that Superflex quarterback value is it's incredible how once you get into the season, how bad people want quarterbacks, because quarterbacks go down. It's like, I have such a good team, but I'm starting Carson Wentz and Ben Roethlisberger. So what do? You go find a quarterback. So, some people can say that Superflex, you don't have to put too much of a premium on the quarterback. And there is some bearing to that. But when it comes down to in season, close to the trade deadline, and you've got Cam Newton as your quarterback 3, quarterback 4 that you got, cheaply last year, and now it's 2022 and he's starting for the Carolina Panthers, you probably make a profit on that quote unquote investment, we'll say. So before we get into another Vikings, just remind everybody the Dynasty Newsletter comes from the Footballguys newsletter that you can subscribe to by going to footballguys.com, and you sign up for the email list that comes from Joe Bryant, Cecil Lammy, and Sigmund Bloom. They're giving you all the news and notes from around the league to help you win, especially now it's crunch time. So instead of getting all those notifications from ESPN, Adam Schefter, Joe Bryant just really breaks it down for you, what you need to know, the nitty gritty, especially late inactives. And hey, if something big happens, I love when he puts together like 3 to 4 paragraph blurbs to just fill you in what you need to know. And something big, move on. You don't need to sit on Twitter, scroll around, try to figure out which beat writer you trust and not. So go to footballguys.com, subscribe to the email list. The next Viking that we're going to talk about is Justin Jefferson. I feel like we have a little bit of a debate that might be coming on because we're going to kind of talk about the wide receiver one again. We talked about running back one last week, and Jonathan Taylor, if he did not prove the week after we have the discussion that, yes, yeah, last week I said it. Look, if you take a 101 in Superflex, I implore you to try to trade back first. But if you stuck to your guns and nobody wanted to trade up with you and you took Jonathan Taylor at 101 in Superflex, I do not think that you are a dumb person. So I put that out there last week, and Jonathan Taylor made it so this week. So Jonathan Taylor looked great. But now we're talking about wide receivers, and we did wide receiver ranks not too long ago talking about Jamar Chase, and I was pretty early in saying that he was in the top 5. Well, I probably should have been saying he was in the top 1, right? So here we are at Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson. So the segment's going to be about Justin Jefferson and how he's looked really well as of late. He has a big game this weekend, but what do you think about Justin Jefferson's dynasty value and I guess the wide receiver market as a whole at the top?
Yeah, and I think that it brings up just I guess, a solid conversation regarding like wide receiver value.
Yeah.
And I'll pull up real quick the dynasty rankings. You can find them on go over to footballguys.com. Our rankers here, whether it be Jeff Tiller, Jason Wood, Andrew Hicks, I mean, any of those folks over there, I mean, they put together some of the aggregate ranks, and you can see kind of where we have them ranked right now. Jamar Chase up front, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Adams. I mean, most of the guys you would typically find in like the top 5 or 6. But I think really if you try and like squeeze it down into Chase, Jefferson, I think that's where the kind of the conversation begins, at least for the two of us. I mean, because at least for me, seeing this game on Sunday, back-to-back games, get 143 yards in week 10, comes out, has another 160 plus yard performance and 2 touchdowns. I mean, in this past week. He has multiple 100-yard games throughout his rookie season after he started to come on in week 3. I would say I think it might just be dealer's choice or personal preference rather regarding where you might have the wide receiver one. At least for me personally, I have Justin Jefferson ranked ahead of him, but I can understand just based off of quarterback situation. I'll let you dive into it that you might want to flip that and just have Chase ahead of him.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to with me. Now, there's going to be a little. I don't know if Zach Taylor's the long-term option for the Bengals, so that's going to be a little hairy. But I do trust the talent with Joe Burrow, and I do believe that he can be conducive with a lot of different systems. So ultimately, I prefer to be attached to Joe Burrow over Kirk Cousins, anyways. I'm happy if I have Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase. I wouldn't add anything to either of them to acquire the other. That would just be silly. Whoever you have, I think you'd be happy with. To me, it's Jamar Chase. I mean, you get slightly younger. I think you get 1 year younger. I know that he came out a year later, but I think he's also a year younger than Justin Jefferson. And then you've got the point. I mean, 2 + 2 = 4. Justin Jefferson was not the better player when he was on the Bengals, and now Jamar Chase has been as good as he could possibly be. Before the show, when we're prepping, you're discussing, well, yeah, but Jamar Chase hasn't had a full year to show that this is what he could be. And while that is a very valid point, he's done what he could with the amount of time that he's given. He couldn't have produced more than he has now, not to mention broken multiple of Randy Moss's rookie wide receiver records. That's going to continue. He's going to keep breaking records this season. So he'll probably hold most, if not all, of the rookie wide receiving records if the touchdowns keep up. I know that he kind of slowed down in that department, and by slow down, I mean he's not averaging 1 a game anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, so he got 1 yesterday, but yeah,
okay, so he's
not
pretty
the same clip.
He's pretty close to 1 a game. I think he's slightly under averaging 1 a game.
Sure.
So, he's probably going to break every wide receiver record. And he was a case just like Trevor Lawrence was, where it's like this guy was so good for so long. Not to mention he didn't play during the COVID year. So good for so long that we're going to have to just pick somebody else to be the trendy wide receiver one. So people started talking about Devonta Smith. People started talking about Jalen Waddle just because, we needed something else to talk about. It can't just be like it can't just be like Jamar Chase is just the greatest. So when it came around draft time, this is going to happen every year. People just started trying to pick a different trendy wide receiver to jump on because, hey, it's been Jamar Chase for so long. Look, he is what we thought he'd be. He's been
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. Apparently, the white line on the ball does not affect him as much as he let off. So he's doing plenty well without the white line on the football. And I think that he's easily the wide receiver one. The problem with saying that is that we've had guys in the past. We're looking at you, Amari Cooper. We're looking at you, Sammy Watkins. We're looking at you, Juju Smith-Schuster,
Hmm.
that we crowned too early. And a lot of people are stuck with those guys on their roster for years and years and years. Because if you were high on them before and you thought they were the wide receiver one at points in their career, well, you probably were never willing to trade them when it was time to trade them, right? But
Yeah.
I'm going to make the argument that Jamar Chase coming out was better than any of them, even Sammy Watkins, even Amari Cooper, and he's proven that already. So this is my case for Jamar Chase being the wide receiver one. Now, the actionable advice here is who's your wide receiver five, because for me, it's Jamar Chase's wide receiver one, Justin Jefferson's two. Those two guys are plenty close. DK Metcalf and AJ Brown are the next two for me. Those guys are plenty close.
Hmm.
If you can figure out who your wide receiver five is, that might be the point where you can trade down from
Yeah.
your Jamar Chase, from your Justin Jefferson, trade back to your five, because there is a decent gap of value between those top four and whoever you have at five. Probably an older guy, probably your Tyreek Hill, your Devontae Adams, something like that. Diggs probably was there, not anymore. But the
Hmm.
point being, if you want to get a little more value and you think like if you're more like me and you're fine having a 27-year-old wide receiver on your roster, you think they still have 3 more years of productivity, whatever, then that's where I think it might be worth trading in the bag with Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson. But that's the only time. I mean, you don't want to take too much of a loss when you have those guys on your roster. Perfect for rebuild, perfect for win now. So it's hard to say trade them, but if you're gonna trade those two or even the top four, then it would have to be like whoever you have at wide receiver five, and you're just betting that they still have like 3 more good years. Like you still think that Tyreek Hill can do Tyreek Hill things for 3 more years, something like that.
Hmm.
Well, now we're finally at a point where maybe you can cash in on these young guys that have hit already and say, I'm still ready to ride with Tyreek Hill. And maybe you get a little extra on top at this point. That's probably the only way that I feel comfortable trading those guys if you feel like you need to.
Yeah, and I think that's the real actionable like advice at that point, because if you let's say if you acquired Jefferson or you acquired Chase, but you might find yourself in a position where you might want to trade out of them so you can get more comparable assets. I'm thinking like maybe even outside of like the top four that you listed, if you want to toss in Cooper Cup, if you are hit by that
Sure.
recency bias, and we
Sure.
could obviously see him having at least a similar workload, maybe not running the same amount of deep routes over the near future, because he came out relatively as
Yeah, he
an
was
older
old when he
prospect
came
as
out. I
well.
think he's
Uh,
28 now.
right, so we could see him at least maintaining his slot role for the
Yeah.
next few seasons, and then with Matthew Stafford still playing relatively well, and them continuing to have at least a productive offense. I would say he kind of also falls in that range of guys that
That's
you could
fair.
probably pick up, also along with a few picks or at least like maybe some younger assets that can help you rebuild your squad should you need to do that. But I think all your points are fair. I think really that it really just comes down to how do you feel, or like what how you weigh those metrics in
Mhm.
terms of Chase producing in the 10 weeks, 11 weeks that now he's been active as a wide receiver in the NFL. I mean, literally breaking a slate back in week 7 with his
Mhm.
201 yards versus Justin Jefferson's doing, let's say, not the same ceiling, but at least similar amount of 100-yard or 100-plus-yard games in his rookie season. And we're still seeing him continue to do that. But like you mentioned, tiebreaker for most folks will be, well, who do you want? Do you want Joe Burrow? Do you want Kirk Cousins? Almost
Right.
everybody's going to lean Joe Burrow, so I
Mhm.
understand that. But yeah, I think that it does kind of come down to like if you were to try and move some of those guys, what's the range that you're looking for if you
Right.
wanted to move them? And I think
Yep.
yeah, moving past that top four into that top five. I mean, maybe Diggs, maybe Cup, maybe Tyreek. I mean, anyone in that plus a few younger assets or plus a
Yeah,
couple of
a
picks. I
pretty
think
penny, definitely.
yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
you're getting similar short-term production, but
Mhm.
also collecting a number of usable years in the
Mhm.
picks also on top of that. I think that's pretty much what you're looking at if you found yourself in a jam and needed to move them.
Yeah, your roster. I mean, if you're looking at your roster, you have Justin Jefferson and that's it. you've got one tradable asset in Justin Jefferson, or just a couple. I mean, there's some really, really terrible rosters out there, but more reasonable point would be if you had like maybe Justin Jefferson and Amari Cooper are your only tradable assets or something like that. And Amari Cooper is difficult to trade right now. I've been trying to trade him. So you're looking at Justin Jefferson, you're like, look, deadline's coming up. I have to do something with my team. How can I trade Justin Jefferson without just getting crushed in terms of value? It's pretty much the only thing I think you can do. Stay in that top 10, stay in that top 8, and see if you can get a pretty penny on top of somebody like Stephon Diggs. Probably not getting the prettiest penny on top of Tyreek Hill, but
Yeah.
you should get something on top of Tyreek Hill for Jamar Chase. In my opinion, at this point, Justin Jefferson even. Before we get to our last segment, just really appreciate everybody coming out to the YouTube channel. We've been growing immensely, so thank you all for that. That's all you for helping us out. So that's how you support Football Guys. We try to help you save time, worry less, and win more. You help us by subscribing, hitting that notification bell, and checking out our wonderful shows like our Wednesday show where Dave, Troy, Victoria help you out with all of your tough questions leading into Thursday and leading into the week. So if you have any tough questions and you want to get in on the mailbag show, you ask them. If you have more dynasty fix that you need some help with, so that's going to be Jordan McNamara, Chad Parsons on the Dynasty Show. So we've got shows here every week. It's not just us. Please make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell so you never miss a Football Guys video. The last thing we're going to discuss is Clyde Edwards-Helaire returns to the lineup, and it's really just time to get a little recheck on his dynasty value and see how we feel about him moving forward. Because, based on what he was worth in terms of value last year compared to this year, you probably feel like you're at a huge loss and you might not ever regain it. So, how do you feel if you're rostering Clyde Edwards-Helaire after his return this week?
I mean, I would say I'd have to feel like pretty confident seeing his workload coming back from injury because over the stint, was it 3 or 4 weeks that he was out, we saw Darrell Williams essentially. I mean, he was an RB1 for multiple weeks while he was out, on at least from a weekly or season-long type of perspective. We literally just watched him Randy Moss a dude in the end zone when they played against the Raiders just a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
So it's like our expectations were that Clyde Edwards-Helaire at best would be the 1B in that offense, like once he returned. But he immediately comes back, has a 47% snap share, which isn't great, but look at the touches that he had. I mean, 14 touches.
Right.
I mean, Darrell Williams essentially he almost doubled his workload on just
right
yesterday.
Away.
I mean, so seeing him come back, have that type of workload coming back, also seeing him not just get the touches, but also seeing him be relatively efficient on those touches as well. Seeing 6-yard, 8-yard, 5-yard gains on those. Also getting the touchdown as well, since he hasn't scored since when? Week 1?
Yeah.
I mean, so actually take that back. He hasn't scored a touchdown this season. So it's like,
oh, I thought he did score. Okay.
So seeing all of that, he has 2 receiving touchdowns, but hasn't had a rushing touchdown this season.
Yep.
So it's like seeing that type of production or seeing that type of opportunity, immediately having him come back. Well, I don't think he'll ever really recoup the draft capital that was required in order to take him in his rookie season. At this point, if the Chiefs are willing to rely on him, and also seeing them start to use running backs more so in the passing game. I mean, this is the type of opportunity he's getting coming out of injury, with the Chiefs, quote unquote, looking like they're starting to figure things out on offense, considering they finally cracked the code on having to beat too high. I mean, or whatever. But I still think that he can at least be a serviceable top 24 running back. I don't think top 12 will ever be in the cards for him. But if the opportunity is going to be there, attached to Patrick Mahomes' offense, we can at least be somewhat confident in his usage moving forward.
Yeah, we won't try to beat a dead horse too much on how things shook out in terms of the draft, because there's a lot of people who were on the CEH train that now think that was a terrible idea. Well, it was a terrible idea at the time too, and people got too excited with CEH's landing spot. So now you see Jonathan Taylor doing amazing. Well, Jonathan Taylor was an infinitely better prospect than Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire landed in a great landing spot. And you see, I mean, Jonathan Taylor got a great offensive line too. Okay, I mean, it wasn't as good of an offense, but it was an excellent offensive line. So I don't know, in the future, we're going to have to try to figure out how we can value landing spot and player and put all that together. Clyde Edwards-Helaire going from running back 5 to running back 5 in his rookie class to running back 5 overall. That's always going to stick in my mind because of how that played out. I mean, at running back 5 in the rookie class, he was probably like running back 28-ish.
Yeah.
Jumps up to like running back 5 overall from the landing spot, and obviously an amazing landing spot, and it just didn't work out in that case. Sometimes, valuations don't always work out. So I'm not trying to beat a dead horse or dog on anyone for that. That's just a learning experience. I have a whole mental note of all the things that I've done wrong, and I try not to do wrong again in Dynasty, and that's going to be one of them. So the problem is you're not going to get back to running back 5 overall ever with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and that's fine because that's where he should have. That's not where he should have been. And you and I traded Clyde Edwards-Helaire when he was RB5 overall because we just did this. It wasn't sustainable. There was nowhere for him to go. There was no up, right? Now, unfortunately, we traded him in a deal that involved Saquon Barkley. That hasn't worked out either, but we thought we were buying Saquon Barkley low. So I liked that process. That was a good process, in my opinion. So looking back at Clyde Edwards-Helaire now, I mean, my advice is that don't think about that running back 5 overall. Think about, is there more ascension he can do from here? Yes. He just came off of injury. He came off of 4 or 5 games of injury. So his value clearly dropped, and this is Dynasty. So he's going to get back, and the Chiefs offense looks back again, and he got his workload back right away after Darrell Williams had an amazing game last week. So that's promising as well. So if you've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire at this point, be happy you have him. He will ascend. He will regain value, and forget that he was ever RB5 overall because it's just not viably going to happen again. So if you're waiting to sell high on him, don't wait until RB5 overall because you're going to have him forever. But if he cracks the top 12 again, probably time to look at trading him, and you will recoup a lot of value for that.
Yeah, and I think that's your best case scenario if the Chiefs continue to use their running backs in the passing game. And I don't know, this might be we might have to do just a whole other show on this because I'm struggling to figure out like how drafting him as high as we did was bad process, given the information that we knew about his collegiate usage. I mean, how many targets he got when he was at LSU?
The receiving.
Yeah. And so, but it was just, I think the problem was that we expected the Chiefs to use him in that manner, but Patrick Mahomes
which was fair.
Literally isn't wired that way, right?
Right, which was fair.
Yeah. So I think that's part of the issue is that while we saw how he could be used, the Chiefs weren't wired that way until they got into those defensive struggles that they have. And now we start to see them using their running backs more often in order to actually give them more opportunities down the field. So I don't know. I think that's more of a philosophical conversation. But I think you're spot on in the idea that if you have them, be encouraged over the opportunity, and then also if you are at least waiting for that window to try and move him. I mean, this is the exact start that you would want. Right. Seeing him immediately come back, recapture the starter role, get that opportunity. Looking at the Chiefs' schedule moving forward, they've got at least a few decent matchups moving in the next few weeks. They still have to play against the Raiders again. I think they got Denver here in the short term as well. So they've got some of those matchups where we can see him get used a bit more often, on top of the production that he's had already, or this opportunity he's had. So there's at least a chance for him to ascend, and at that point you have a chance to move him.
Right. Absolutely. So that's going to conclude today's show. Thank you all for coming out. Please like, subscribe, rate, review, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. We will catch y'all next time.
Peace.